coming up on the Tall Mike Wine podcast.
Hey, we've got almost all these kids up and running on their own power. Let's start over.
A lot of women in their 40s are like, man, if I could be pregnant right now and have a complicated birth, that would be...
Growing up in the Boston area, can you tell me at what age you teach the kids to park the car?
I was raised on bag cereal. So I understand, that box wine is what's on the inside that counts. And my first exposure to comedy was The Muppets. I guess technically Fozzie Bear was the first comedian I ever saw.
And now, the Tall Mike Wine podcast.
The cell phones have been silenced. The wine is poured. And just like that, the podcast begins. The Tall Mike Wine podcast. The wine podcast that's not all about wine, because all about wine could be, in the wrong hands, pretty stiff. We're not stiff here. We're limber and loose. I'm Mike Stone, your host. People call me Tall Mike Wine for obvious reasons when I stand up. Welcome to the podcast, heard in 63 countries on 6 continents and in 48 of these United States and the District of Columbia. From Columbia, South Carolina, to Forest Grove, Oregon. From Bedford, New Hampshire, to Floral Park, New York. That's out on Long Island. And wherever you are, and I thank you for finding me. Now, if you wouldn't mind helping others find me, I'd appreciate a big 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. And if you could leave a review, that'd be awesome as well. They tell me it helps a lot. Be sure you're subscribed to the podcast on whichever app you're using so you don't miss the new episodes as they drop. And if you are new, take a scroll through the over 2 years worth of episodes. There's some really good stuff to hear. Now, on to episode 40 from my home studio in Novato, California. It's my day off from the winery and a beautiful spring day here in Northern California. My guest chatting with us via Zoom. He is a stand-up comic based in Atlanta, Georgia, spreading his own brand of awkward funny throughout the Southeast. He also hosts a podcast, 4th and 10. As you might guess, it's a sports podcast. What does it all have to do with wine? I met he and his wife when they visited me at Nicholson Ranch in Sonoma a couple of months back. So there is a wine angle here. Let's welcome to the podcast, Nathan Owens. How are things out in Hotlanta?
They are. It's a little rainy today, but I'm excited to be here. It's nice. It's a perfect day to drink.
Oh,
that's what I realized.
Every day is a good day to drink, but
there we go.
I guess if you can parse it down to the perfect days, that's even better.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Was it Super Bowl weekend when you and your wife visited the winery?
Yeah, it was Super Bowl weekend, which being from the East Coast, I had to adjust to the Super Bowl starting at like 3:00 out there, which is one of the reasons I think we visited the winery at like 10 a.m.
I think you were there early.
It was early. It was a wonderful, beautiful day. And yeah, we got back in time for the Super Bowl, which was, even better watching with a bottle of the wine that we brought back.
Wait, you got back to your hotel, not back home?
No, not back home. We went back to the beautiful Holiday Inn in San Francisco.
Refresh my memory. What was the occasion for your visit to the Bay Area?
My wife was out there on business, and I got to tag along. And so we just made like a long weekend out of it. She was there for some conference Wednesday and Thursday, and then I flew out there with her. And Friday, Saturday, we did some touristy stuff, some sightseeing stuff, and wine country was on that list.
Were you gathering material for your act? Did funny things happen while you were out here?
You're always kind of gathering material, whether you plan to or not. As far as specifically funny things, I did have a show in San Francisco, and it was very bizarre to hear those comics just kind of talk about what they're going through, which a lot of them were like leaving the tech industry to pursue stand-up.
Okay.
And that was a very bizarre thing to hear of like, oh, you left that very stable thing that everybody will always need for the rest of time. And now we're in the exact same location. Me with one semester of community college under my belt, and you with who knows what your resume looks like.
Right. A lot of engineering degrees out there in the tech world, and the nice, steady, pretty fat paychecks from what I hear.
Yeah, I would assume they're somewhat okay. I think they're better than stand up is for some people.
If they get to move out to San Francisco after they get out of college, they must be doing pretty well because the rents are not low. Let's just put
No.
it that way. Nathan, your bio says you were born in West Virginia, but raised in Georgia. How old were you when you were moved from state to state, and why?
We moved when I was maybe 3.5 or 4, so not too long. We had family there, so we continued to go back and visit. But we moved because of my dad's job. Kind of bounced. I think we did North Carolina for a couple months, and then settled about an hour north of Atlanta. If you know the area, you just go up 85 towards Greenville, and you will hit Buford, Flowery Branch, that whole area. It's a real exciting place. There's a Super Target now, so it's doing pretty well.
Super Target.
A Super Target. You'd think a Target would be enough, but they said we want a Super Target. So.
These people have earned a Super Target.
Exactly.
So you were moving around with your family. Who was the family? Your dad, your mom, siblings?
Yeah, mom, dad, 2 siblings. I have an older sister, a younger sister, and then I have a younger brother who's 10 years younger than me. So he came a little bit later.
Was that one of those oops?
We were told, of course not, but doing some basic math, I don't know why you would choose to have an infant after having, 12, 10, and 8. And then you're like, we should throw in a newborn to the mix.
That's right.
That would be.
Hey, we've got almost all these kids up and running on their own power. Let's start over with a baby.
Yeah. A lot of women in their 40s are like, man, if I could be pregnant right now and have a complicated birth, that would be wonderful.
Life goals.
Exactly.
So were you the funny kid in the house? Were you getting in trouble? Were you making up jokes? Tell me about your childhood, if they were precursors to your current comedy career.
Yeah, I was in trouble a lot. I'm not really the funny person in my family, which is frustrating. My dad's much funnier than I am. My younger sister's very funny. My mom's unintentionally funny. She doesn't always realize it. But yeah, I constantly get voted third funniest. They will do a vote at the dinner table, and I come in third a lot.
Third out of 5?
Third out of 5, depending on who else is there. So
not even in the top half, really.
Not really, no. So it's a humbling thing, which I look around, I'm like, look, I'm the only one here with a resume. Like I have videos I can point to. That doesn't always help in your.
But obviously, it helped you growing up around people that were funny.
Yeah, you learn to survive. I think that's you learn to have a thick skin, and you learn to survive, and you learn how to brush things off and move on, and you learn how to fight a little bit yourself.
The comic trope of people from the South is pretty widespread. I think most people that have been exposed to humor know that sometimes the joke is on the guy from the South. Who do people in the South, from the South, make jokes about?
That's a good question. I think it depends on who you border.
Okay.
I would say that the easiest answer is Florida, which I would say most of the South would consider Florida not the South.
Really?
Like we don't even claim them.
Okay.
They are their own entity. They're their own thing with their own stereotypes. There are Southern things about Georgia, absolutely. But we are not like meth addicts, trains as alligator to, eat the neighbor's boa constrictor Southern. Accent-wise, it's Boston. A lot of people use the Southern accent to kind of just be like, I'm trying to tell you that I'm dumb without telling you I'm dumb. But we're trying to change that a little bit and trying to get it going where you use the Boston accent to kind of portray if you're not the sharpest tool.
Can you give me a little of that Boston?
I don't have it very well.
No?
Because it's just the right? Like the
right. Right. So people come to the winery, and if they tell me they're from Boston, I always say to them, I've always wondered something about the growing up in the Boston area. Can you tell me at what age you teach the kids to park the car? And if that gets a smile, I'll say something like, what's up with Worcester? Why so many letters?
Is there an accent you've had the most trouble with people visiting the winery?
I can't say that anybody from the United States has had an accent that was too hard to understand. I always try and figure out where people are from before they tell me when they're talking to me, and they obviously have a bit of an accent, and I'm pretty good at that.
Okay.
It's the people from across the pond who are speaking English that's really different from ours, especially if you get to the UK and you go way up north, close to Scotland. Then when I'm listening to them, I'm also looking for the button that will turn on the subtitles.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right, we've come to the time in the podcast where I ask my guest, Nathan, what is in your glass?
Okay, so here's the part that if I have impressed anybody, all of that goes out the window. I am not a great wine drinker.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I think I like too many things. I don't know enough to have a strong opinion. So I went to the local grocery store, Corner Grocer down the street, which has a couple shelves of wine. I tend to go for the lighter, colder, sweeter stuff.
Okay.
And this just says Rosé All Day.
Oh, look at that. Rosé All Day.
Rosé All Day. And it was a good color, and it was refrigerated. So I knew it was going to be cold, and it's been kind of muggy here.
What was the price on that Rosé All Day?
The price was $9.99.
That's perfect. That's really good for something you want to drink all day, because you might need more than one bottle if you're going to do it all day.
Absolutely.
Do you know where it came from? Does it tell you on the bottle where the grapes were grown?
It says France.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if that's like Paris, Texas, or a place like that. I don't know. If the back is it's very descriptive. This is a vegan wine.
Okay, that's nice to know.
There's no meat in this wine.
Right. They didn't soak any of their French meats. There's no foie gras in there.
Is that I did write that down because I wanted to ask you, are there non-vegan wines?
Yes, there are. Hey, that's a great technical question. There are processes in winemaking, and mostly it's when you're getting ready to drain all your barrels and blend your finished wine. There's still some microscopic particles of all of the little bits and pieces of the grape in the wine. And you want to get as much of that stuff to the bottom of the barrel as you can, and then siphon the barrel down to where you get to that layer of sediment and stop. So you want all that sediment to go to the bottom of the tank. And there are things called fining agents. And some of them, I believe, are made of like fish guts or something. They actually dump it into the wine, and it bonds with the little, tiny bits of grapes that are still in the wine and sinks to the bottom. So there's also egg whites can be used for fining the wine. They can mix the egg whites in there, and the egg whites will draw all of the sediment to the bottom, helping to fine the wine, make it clear so you don't have to filter it. But most wineries nowadays use things that are clay-based for fining. If they're going to use any, we don't use any of those things at Nicholson Ranch. We just let the sediment sink to the bottom, and then we try not to get too much of the sediment out from the barrel when we put it into the blending tank. But, some of our reds, people find sediment in them, and then I have to explain what that is.
Okay, so I do have a follow-up question with that. Obviously, you're at Nicholson Ranch drinking the best wine I have ever had.
Okay.
It's phenomenal. So it might be a while since you've done this. But if you are picking up a random bottle at a grocery store or in a bottle shop, what on the back do you look for either like red flag deal breakers or like, oh, I like this display, so this bottle is for me?
The red flag for me is being vague as to where the grapes were grown. You said that bottle says the grapes were grown in France. Does it give you any more specificity than that?
2021 product of France.
Okay.
So
that right there is a red flag. If the winemaker is proud of where the grapes were grown, he's going to tell you pretty specifically. In our case, it might say Sonoma County, and then it might give you a sub-region. And Nicholson Ranch is located within the borders of two different subregions, the Sonoma Valley and the Sonoma Coast. So that's good. If it says Sonoma Coast on it, that means, they're telling you it's in some part of Sonoma. That's not just Sonoma in general. So they're kind of bragging that we grew the grapes in this part of Sonoma. If you see just California on the label, that's kind of a red flag. So I would say your bottle of rosé has a red flag there when it just says France. And you talked about going to the grocery store. That, to me, I always tell people, if you can help it, don't go to the grocery store, because there's way more bad wine at the grocery store than there is good wine. And your odds of just choosing a bottle at random and having it be a good bottle the odds are against you, because there's just a ton of bad wine at the grocery stores. The other stuff that's on the back of the label is really all marketing. Somebody in an office trying to figure out how to get people to grab that bottle and take it home, writing stories or trying to come up with verbiage that sounds cool, but a lot of times it might not even be valid. However, at the end of the day, what is most important is, do you like your rosé?
I do. Again, I'm not picky, so right. I don't. Any of your listeners that are good wine drinkers probably shouldn't listen to me. But if you're looking for somebody to bring to a bridal shower, or, if you're looking for something to bring somewhere that you don't think you'll drink, this is perfect. You just drop it on the table and back away.
There's definitely that strategy too. Certain times, certain occasions.
There are bottles if we had brought one of the bottles that we took back from your winery, it would have been an announcement that that's what we had brought.
Right.
This is the good stuff. We would have had the story behind it, and probably would have made up some very wine heavy lingo, put it on the table where everybody saw me put it on the table, so they know that bottle's ours. That is not this bottle. This bottle, you slide it in and you check the box that you brought something.
Hey man, Rosé all day. It's catchy.
All day.
It's catchy. There are some great rosés that come out of the south end of France, so perhaps that's from the south of France somewhere. And they do produce some really decently priced wines that are rosé wines from the south of France. When you were at the winery, did I give you some of my coasters?
You did.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure you had coasters, because I ran out for a while. And it took me a while to get some more reprinted. And this is the part of the podcast where I plug the coasters and tell people that are listening, if you would like your very own set of Tall Mike Wine podcast coasters, send me an email. That's tallmikewine@gmail.com. And speaking of all things on the internet, including social media, I need to take some pictures here, because I always forget to take pictures. And then at the end of the show, I'm going to say, follow me on Instagram. And then I don't have anything to post. So hang on a second here. Here, smile for the camera. There's Nathan. Here, let me make sure you can see both of us here. There we are. And then hold up your bottle of rosé so I can get that on the camera too. Rosé all day.
I love you want to be promoting this.
Maybe I'll have you take a picture of it and send it to me.
All right.
No, because I have to put it in the show notes. When we talk about a wine on the show, it goes in the show notes. So people, if they're really curious and want to know what it was we were drinking, they can find it in the show notes. Okay?
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to follow Nathan on Instagram. It's good for a laugh. You seem to be gigging a lot down and around the southeast. And then you're going to Ireland soon, at least if what I'm seeing on your feed is to be believed.
Yeah, I'll be in Ireland the last week in May, first week in June. It's the same reason I was out in California. Wife's going out there for business, and I'm grabbing those coattails and flying across the Atlantic to the snakeless island.
That is cool, man. Kudos to your wife for getting you out of the house a little bit.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about podcasting. 4th and 10 is your podcast. How long have you been doing it?
Man, I think we've been doing that for 6 years now.
Whoa.
Yeah, we're coming up on that. Just myself and a couple other comedians that get together once a week. We call it sports-ish.
Right.
It's kind of we've been told we are the sports podcast for people who don't like sports.
Oh, okay. Like I talk about this podcast, the wine podcast, that's not all about wine.
Exactly. We just, every rabbit trail we're chasing, every riff that we can get out, we're doing it. Comics hanging out, and it is under the umbrella of sports, but it's a good time.
It's fun to listen to comics riffing on each other. I'm a big fan of a podcast called Fly on the Wall that is Dana Carvey and David Spade, two former cast members of Saturday Night Live, and they will find another former cast member, and the three of them will get talking about, behind the scenes stuff, back in the day stuff, and it's typically a good solid hour of really funny people talking to each other.
Just get smart, funny people in front of a microphone and then just hit record. They're going to create a really fun product.
So who are your co-hosts on 4th and 10?
So I hosted with two other comics, Damon Sumner and David Perdue, and then our fourth friend, Dan Duncan.
Are these local Southeastern guys?
Yeah, they are. Damon kind of goes all over the place, but David and he are both based in Atlanta. So that's where we met. And yeah, we clicked. We started doing this podcast together, and it's just fun to get together once a week and just hang out. It really is a good time.
You know, you might as well hang out with your friends once a week and record it just in case something really cool happens, and then it's out there for everybody. It's a beautiful thing.
Exactly.
Let's get back to wine for just a second. Your wife is into wine. Obviously, she was the one that was instrumental in getting you up into wine country on her trip to the Bay Area. So she's the main wino in the house. What do you like to sip on in general?
In general, I like things colder and sweeter.
Okay.
And she is the opposite of that.
Now you can stray from wine if you want to here. You and I go out in the afternoon, you know, we're just finished working and it's time to sip something and just hang out and chat. What are you going to order?
Man, I love bourbon and whiskey. I'm a big fan of cocktails.
Okay.
If you got a margarita, I'll do that. If you can put an umbrella in a glass, I'm all in on those. Anything that can be sort of beachy.
Well, you live down there where it's warm. It's warm most of the time, right?
It does. It stays warm. We get a little chilly December, January, February, and that's about it. But yeah, I really love cocktails, but it's tough to beat just a good glass of bourbon with a big ice cube in it.
I hear you on that.
Do you stray from wine at all?
Oh, all the time. I'm an equal opportunity imbiber. If you and I went out to dinner at a fairly decent restaurant, I would walk in with a bottle of wine in my hand. I bring wine, my own wine in because I can't really turn the camera, but my wine rack is over here and it's pretty big. But when we sat down, as soon as the server came over, I would say, could you bring me a Manhattan, please? Maybe a Maker's Mark. Thank you. And that's kind of my go-to start of the evening. And I feel like that kind of washes the day away. You sit and you sip your Manhattan, they open your bottle of wine, let it breathe a little bit, and you sip the bourbon. And I say Maker's Mark because that's pretty much anywhere you're going to go, it's available. Even if you're in a dive bar, they're going to have Maker's Mark. Now, if I go to a fancier restaurant, they've got some fancier bourbons, I might ask for a recommendation from somebody. But that's sort of my go-to is the Maker's Mark Manhattan to start the evening.
If you had to jump ship to a different kind of alcohol production, do you have one in mind that you would prefer? Like if you had to go work at a distillery or a brewery, or are you interested in that side of any other alcohols?
I spent a lot of time in the restaurant business, and in the early years, I did manage a small pub that specialized in microbrews, and that was fun. That was kind of back in the early years of the craft beer revolution, and that was really cool. But I don't know that I would have the same connection to beer or alcohol working in a place like that. Doing what I do at the winery is a little more specialized, I think, because you can go super, super, super deep on wine because wine has such an immense history, and there are so many different ways for it to be made. And there probably are with beer and spirits as well, but it doesn't ring my bell as much.
It is insane. It's one of those industries. It's like it's been around as long as we know.
Yeah,
it really is crazy, and it's just people are still figuring out little twists on it and little ways to tweak it and make it better. And it's like at some point we got to be done, right?
I don't think so, because the world keeps changing. We have this set of parameters in place, but the world keeps changing. What's happening in the wine world right now is that a lot of people that have been growing the same grapes for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in the specific areas, because those grapes work well in that microclimate, guess what? It's getting warmer. So all over the wine community, they're experimenting in certain areas with grapes that they might have to start using 10 or 20 years from now because it might be warmer, and the grapes they're using now, it might be too warm for those grapes. So the landscape changes just a little bit. The landscape shifts. And then there's new technology that comes along that helps you do things more efficiently. And, but to your point, the fact that what we're doing is growing grapes and then fermenting them with yeast to turn the sugar into alcohol. That's the basic essence of it. And that's been going on since, back in Mesopotamian times. I
got one more question because I'm very interested in this. And this might be tough to answer because it's on the spot.
All right.
Do you have like a favorite like innovation from the past 20 years? Or whatever, like something where you were just like, once this happened, once somebody figured out this, once I started doing this, like
Right.
things really clicked and ramped up. That you're
Like
like,
what's
this
been a
is,
major game changer?
yeah, for you personally.
I can't really think of a major game changer. What's coming to mind immediately is if you would have come over to my house 20 years ago for a glass of wine and hang out and open a bottle, I would have probably had a random collection of wine glasses that I picked up at various, tasting events where the wine glass was part of the ticket price. And now if you come to my house, I have some very nice glassware that I spend real money on, and it allows you to really enjoy the wine much better because these are glasses that are made for people who really love wine. So for me, I stepped up my glassware game probably 10, 12 years ago. Started getting the good glasses because I was starting to see that, wow, when I go here and they have these amazing glasses, the wine tastes better and I like it more. And it's a better looking glass. So that's probably personally what has changed in my wine life. As far as the wine industry goes, I can't really think of anything that has changed drastically in the last 20 years. There's probably something, but it's not popping into my head. But thank you for asking. I hope I answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, that's one thing we do not have the good glassware.
All right, there you go. There's a thing that I can recommend to you if you want to enjoy your wine just a little bit more. And it's not necessarily for everyone, but I say go wine glass shopping. Spend a little bit of time. Ask a few people what they like, people that are into wine. Step up your glassware game just a little bit. I'm taking a picture of the label of the bottle I am sipping right now because we're going to talk about that now.
Right.
And it's actually a pretty cool label because I think it's made of leather. I'm going to show it to you as soon as I show you.
So that's definitely not a vegan bottle of wine.
It's not a vegan bottle of wine because the label is made of leather. Exactly. So look at the label on this one. That is actually a very thick piece of what I think is leather. It might just be a thick vinyl, but it's certainly meant to look like leather. And as I said to you, I think before we started recording, this is a nicer bottle than I would normally open in the middle of the afternoon, which is when we are recording this. It's early evening for you, but it's like 3:30 in the afternoon for me. But I'll be sipping on this through the night. And then they also put one of those fancy wax caps on this bottle that I had to drill through with my corkscrew to get open, and actually ended up with a little piece of wax in my wine when I first poured it, but that's okay.
So that's when they didn't cork. They like sealed it with just like a thing of wax.
No, they cork it the regular way. And then normally after you cork it, you drop a little tin cap onto the top of the bottle. And then that gets spun around and kind of stuck to the top of the bottle. And that's what you cut off with your knife when you're opening the bottle, the cap. But you could also, after it's corked, you dip the top of the bottle in this specific type of wax. Think of that Maker's Mark bottle we were just talking about. The wax cap on the Maker's Mark bottle. Some wineries will use that same wax dipping thing to denote some of their better bottles. To say, this is a little fancier. So we're going to make it harder for you to open.
You got to earn this one.
You've got to earn this one. So we've come to the point in the podcast where we talk about what's in my glass. And I have a Napa Valley red wine in my glass from a small winery called Grieve Family Winery. And Grieve, let's see, the namesake of Grieve is a guy named David Grieve. And apparently he's a golfer as well as a guy who grows grapes, because this wine is called Double Eagle. So it's named after one of the rarest of golf shots. And this is a Napa Valley Bordeaux style blend. And when I say that, I mean it's based on the traditional grapes that are grown in the Bordeaux region of France. This one is a blend of 54% Cab Sauv, 32% Cabernet Franc, and then the rest of it is Merlot. And the Double Eagle from Grieve is from the 2014 vintage. So I've had it for a bit. I've been aging it, been waiting to open it. The winery itself only makes 2,000 cases a year, so it's pretty small.
Oh, wow.
This wine is right up my alley. This is the kind of wine I love to drink. It spent quite a bit of time in French oak barrels, and more than half of those barrels were brand new, so it's developed some nice nuances from the barrel. But you put your nose into the glass, and this one gives you that really seductive dark red, almost black fruit, on the nose, and you can just smell that it's pretty full-bodied, and you can smell that it's probably pretty smooth because this has been aging for just a little while, and it's really, I think it's pretty perfect right now.
It looks phenomenal. I mean, use the term perfect. That's not a word you can just throw around.
No, but life is short. Find the perfect wines and drink them. A lot of the mistakes people make is that they search out the nice bottles, they buy them, and then they age them and they age them and they wait for the special occasion. And then those wines, they never get drunk. I buy nice wines and I drink it on a regular basis. That's just me.
Yeah, we came back from your winery with a few bottles, and we definitely planned on saving them for a very special occasion.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is they just look at you every day. And you just sit on the couch and you go, I am 3 feet away from really, really good wine.
Is the bottle looking at you, or is it actually talking to you?
I would say at the very least, it's body language.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is, maybe a few whispers here and there, just, drink me. And then, and I would say we did not regret it. We did not have a single special occasion for drinking those bottles. And we never once.
Hey man, opening a nice bottle of wine is an occasion all by itself. Like, we're going to open this, and it's going to make this a special night.
Yeah.
Speaking of hearing voices, a lot of times I go out to dinner and I might start with that Manhattan and then move into wine, and then maybe more wine, and then maybe something just slightly sweet at the end of the meal instead of dessert. Then I get home, and if I'm not going right to bed, I'll sit and read and surf the net. And at some point, I hear a little voice saying, Mike. And I'm like, who's that? And I look around, and it's that bourbon bottle sitting on the shelf telling me that I need a nightcap. And that can be troublesome. So I try and ignore it.
Look, some, though, are very convincing. That's the problem, is you just, and you're like, you know what? I should just go ahead so that you'll stop talking.
That's right.
You just go ahead. I'm going to pour a drink to just shut you up. And yet you just, you're not going to regret it till the next day.
It is pretty well known that the wine world is full of some pretty stiff people. And there are a whole lot of rules about drinking wine. It can be intimidating. So what we do on this podcast is attempt to break away from a lot of that stuff with humor, because you really don't need any special knowledge to drink wine. I'm sure it's a topic someone like you could really dig into for your act. Do you have any wine-based humor?
So I actually do. I talk a lot about how I enjoy box wine. And I think I want to take, I'm trying to remove a little bit of the stigma. There's some perfectly fine wines that are just in bags and in boxes. And, I tell people, like, I was raised on bag cereal. So I understand, the box wine is what's on the inside that counts. I do that. We get Voda Box every once in a while. I try to be brand loyal, try to get name brand box wine. But yeah, I would say that is my wine-based jokes right now. And you slowly see people kind of come to terms with that's who they are. Mm-hmm. At start, I'll usually, try to ask a round of applause. Who here is a box wine person? Mm-hmm. You start where you don't get too many people willing to admit it. And then you go, now, wait a second, let's chip away at this. Let's figure this out. Because for me, a box wine, it's not judgmental. It's kind of a mystery because you don't know how much of it you've really had.
That's true. You can't see how much is left.
You have no idea. So it kind of feels like a miracle the more it goes, And
are you talking about like Hanukkah?
It's a box wine is Hanukkah adjacent.
The box wine kept pouring. We thought we only had enough for one night, but we had enough for 7 nights.
7 nights, but we still finished it in one night. That's the problem.
All right. Well, it's not a miracle. It's not a miracle then.
It's a miracle if I wake up without a headache. That's the miracle of box wine. And I get it. It's a humble, down to earth way to drink fermented grapes.
Yeah, my dad loves the box wine. My dad is a big fan. He is always sending me pictures of his box of wine.
Have you guys thought of releasing a special box wine from there, like a rejected, or maybe a bottle that doesn't quite make it, that gets right angles?
Yeah, that's not going to happen at my winery. But that's probably where most of that box wine comes from, is the rejects from some of the better wineries.
I mean, you just need a famous person to drink it. I mean, you think Crocs made a comeback just because Post Malone put a pair on. If you guys can figure out what the Crocs would be of box wine.
I think that's an interesting marketing idea for some other wine company.
Somebody else.
Nathan, who were your favorite comics when you were super young? Where did you see them?
Oh, man. My first exposure to comedy was the Muppets.
They started the music and lighted the lights.
They did. We had a bunch of VHSs of taped episodes of the Muppet Show.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess technically Fozzie Bear was the first comedian I ever saw.
You know, the great thing about the Muppet Show was that humor was all encompassing. It entertained the children because it was puppets saying words, and obviously that's already entertaining. And some of the humor was very adult, very borderline risque, I want to say.
It did a very good job of, we're going to push the envelope a little bit. We're going to make a few innuendos. I mean, I think Kermit was looking at the camera before Jim Halpert was. So they were really ahead of their time.
And you can get away with risque humor a little bit more risque, maybe because you're a puppet, right?
I'm sure HR at the Muppet Show was a bit of a nightmare at times, but again, they're puppets. So are they really saying anything gross? They're just waist up.
So Fozzie Bear taught you about stand-up comedy because he had the premise and the setup and the payoff, albeit very simple.
Yes. Yeah, it was the bare bones of it. But that was my first exposure to, this is a thing people do.
And then who else?
And then growing up a little bit more, Brian Regan, I found him in middle school.
Okay.
And he, to this day, is one of my favorite comedians. I think he should be on the Mount Rushmore of comedy. His album, Brian Regan, I think it's just Brian Regan Live.
Okay.
It's one of the best of all time. When I heard it, I remember not understanding why it was so funny.
Mm-hmm. There was some adult humor there that you weren't quite getting.
I think like it was a little bit of that, and then like the way it just made people around me laugh, because it's very universal. And then the older I've gotten, I think John Mulaney is the best working comedian right now.
He's pretty big.
Yeah, his last hour that just came out on Netflix, it might be my favorite hour of comedy I've ever heard.
Wow. So who else is on Mount Rushmore of comedy for you?
For me, comedy obviously is very subjective. So, but
for you, that's why I say you.
For me, it's John Mulaney, Brian Regan, Nate Bargatze, and Jerry Seinfeld.
Seinfeld for sure is historically significant.
Historically significant. Maybe the most bizarre person to ever do comedy as well. Like the more interviews I see with him, I don't know if you watch Comedians in Cars. He's just a weird dude. He's a weird dude,
and he's probably the least likely guy you would think would be funny if you just met him on the street.
Mm-hmm. And that's true with a lot of comics. We have that outlet. It's very almost bizarre where we joke all the time where people are probably bored when they're around us. Mm-hmm. We're not always we're not Jim Carrey. We can't always be on at all times.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. What about you? Do you consume a lot of stand-up?
Not a lot. I remember when I was a kid, the comic's ultimate goal was to get on Johnny Carson and have that initial appearance on Johnny Carson, which then opened the doors to the other talk shows and then, gigs in Vegas. That's how old I am when, Johnny Carson was like the ultimate goal. So I remember, people like George Carlin, and I remember when Robin Williams made his first appearance on the TV series Happy Days. He was totally unknown, and he did this guest spot where he and Fonzie were the only people in that whole episode. And I remember sitting there. I was home alone that night, and I was probably 12 years old, and I'm thinking, I don't know what I just watched, but I can't wait to find out if my friends watched this because we need to talk about it, because that was really something entirely different, and I had never really experienced anything like it.
Those are fun moments, and it happens a lot with comedy where you're sitting there going, I cannot tell you why this is incredible.
Right.
But like something magical is happening. Roy Wood Jr.'s stand-up does that to me a lot.
Okay.
Where you're watching it, and I mean, we watched his last special, my wife and I, where we had to pause it 2 or 3 times to just recover.
We have to discuss.
We had to recover because we were laughing through the setup for the next joke, and we were missing.
And you have to take it all in. I mean, sometimes if it goes too fast, it's like, wow, let me just let me just revel in that. It's almost like sipping a really nice wine and being like, oh, that's really good. If you had to take another sip immediately, it's like, wait a minute, I'm still enjoying that last sip.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as far as your career goes, what are some of the ultimate goals you have for your comedy near term? And then, of course, the farther down the road, total world domination goals?
Just the easy answer is to make a living doing this. That would be the easiest goal. There are a few checked boxes that I want to hit. I know I brought up the Muppets. It would be an absolute honor to work with them in some capacity, for that to become full circle, whether it's Sesame Street, whether it's, a cameo in a Muppet movie, whatever. But I mean, ultimately, yeah, it's just to be in the conversation of great comedians. And that's Netflix specials, that's late night appearances. It's all kind of that almost stereotypical stuff. I mean, the real answer that sounds kind of boring is that you just want to be respected by the people that you respect. If I can get to a level where Nate Bargatze enjoys my stuff, somebody like Dustin Nickerson says, like, man, that was a great joke. That kind of stuff is what keeps you going.
Right. But the thing is, if you get to that point, then you will achieve all of those other things. If you've been brought into the greater conversation and are known by those people, then all the other boxes are going to get checked, like check, 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 check. You will have arrived.
Yeah. Whatever I can do to get into the Muppets. That's what they have so many cameos in their movies. I'll be a car salesman. I'll be a waiter,
right?
A doorman, whatever you need for me. I'll jump in.
Well, let's put it out there into the world. Kermit the Frog.
There we go.
Nathan Owens wants a meeting.
Yeah. Who knows? Kermit might be a listener. That's the fun thing about podcasts is you are one share away from just random spectacular people. So please, y'all, share, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Like help this podcast grow, because it is. That's right. It's a lot of fun.
Nathan, thanks for hanging with us on the podcast.
Absolutely.
I hope you have a great time in Ireland.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. It's the first time I left the country, so it should be pretty exciting.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'm going to read the credits here. Just hang on. The Tall Mike Wine Podcast was conceived and is written, produced, edited, and maintained by yours truly. To see behind the scenes of the podcast and all the wines I drink, follow me on Instagram at Tall Mike Wine. Use my hashtag #SexyBottleShot to tag bottle as you're enjoying, and I'll follow you. For feedback, questions, or if you'd like to have your very own set of official Tall Mike Wine Podcast coasters, email me. That's tallmikewine@gmail.com. Send me your address and a stack of coasters will be in the mail to you. If you haven't done so, I'd appreciate a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Write a review if you're feeling wordy. It all helps. Be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. And that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks, Nathan Owens, for sitting in the guest chair. Until next time, I'm Mike Stone. Keep swirling, keep sniffing, keep sipping. Cheers.